Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers, and I'm looking at this book from Jordan's. It's called Director's Duties. Probably seen it around. It's now in a second edition. It's been written by Professor Andrew Kay. This is the book itself, quite a heavy one actually. It runs to 500 odd pages. You can see at the back you've got a very detailed index, and what you've got in the structure of the book itself, a nice paragraph numbering for the paragraphs and useful footnotes including the cases and the detail. Then at the front you've got a main index there, and of course going right up to you've got a preface right at the front for the first edition, and then you've got a preface for the new edition which actually tells you why he's had to produce something so reasonably quickly at least in the legal history world. That's the back of the book, which gives you some idea of what's actually included. There's a lot of stuff in here. We've written a review about this book, which is in the journals and on the web, and we've given it a title, For Practitioners and Directors, an up-to-date guide to the general duties of directors as contained in the Companies Act 2006. Now, for many of you, it seems rather a while ago since we had that piece of legislation, largest piece in parliamentary history as a piece of legislation. But I think it's now time to reflect a bit on that. And of course, the second edition has come out as we've seen the cases come through and the arguments developing about what directors do and what their responsibilities are. So let me give you some idea of what we think about this book and where it comes in the general feel of things. The law on directors' duties, as Professor Kay has pointed out, is, quote, one of the most important and interesting aspects of company law. I certainly found that when I studied it, and I've always found it interesting to know what sort of responsibilities and duties they actually have, because to many people they don't really know much about what these guys get up to, and that includes ladies of course as well. The overall result therefore, says Kay, has been a considerable amount of litigation and some significant cases which have allowed for a sophisticated jurisprudence to develop. That's of course where we come in, because we want to look at the way in which the legal thinking is going, and that's both in terms of the judicial thinking and the way in which we, in terms of business and advising people on business, see businesses developing, especially during times of critical economic difficulty. So the advent of the Companies Act in 2006, some 8 years ago now, which was an historic piece of legislation, as I've said, has seen a codification of the law in this area, probably on a scale we've never seen really before. The first edition was published in 2008, and it dealt solely with the general duties of directors, as set out in Chapter 2, Part 10 of the Companies Act. And of course, the new second edition, which Jordan's have produced, has been extensively updated and cites and examines all relevant cases since the publication of the last edition. And that will, of course, be useful as more general rather than very detailed reading. You're not in Lincoln's Inn Law Library now, you're actually specifically just getting the feel for it. So you've got some idea of what new cases have come in and where they fit into the round, as it were. Chapters have also been expanded in the book with new material, including Chapter 5 on the duty to act within powers, which deals, for example, with what has been referred to as the restrictive approach on the matter of a claim of good faith. The import of this approach is that it does not matter if directors believe in good faith that their action is in the best interests of the company. What does matter is that if the courts assess that the director's action or actions were improper, such actions will be regarded as a breach of duty. So quite a tough approach, and a tough sanction would obviously come in. This is of course just one of a multiplicity of insights noted in the erudite volume. Also contained in the book are new and expanded materials in chapters 13 to 15, dealing with respectively the duty to consider the interest of creditors, very important at the moment with bankruptcies up, derivative proceedings and the consequences of a breach. Again, very important if you're looking at contentious litigation. Also note chapters 6, 7 and 8 on duties to promote the success of the company. I always think company promotions are a very interesting area, both in terms of the development of the company and the way the law has gone, actually. You've also got areas to look at where they exercise independent judgment, and you have to be mindful, and the book certainly is, of the various aspects of the duty of care, which is always basically at the back of our minds, I think, in this sort of thing, including skill, diligence, record keeping, accounts and so forth. And it's also, I think, interesting to note that factors that the courts will consider in determining whether or not there's been a breach of duty are also laid out. And again, these are tests which counsel will certainly advise on, but it's useful to know about them in the more general sense before sort of coming and visiting your local barrister, as it were. What directors do or do not do, remarks the author, can have a significant effect on their company's fortunes and ultimately on those of shareholders and others who have an interest or a stake in companies. Quite right. Which is why this carefully researched and copiously footnoted book should be considered an essential purchase, in our view, for company directors naturally, as well as company secretaries, accountants and certainly barristers and solicitors involved in corporate law, working either independently or in-house. I think generally, again, like much of Jordan's stuff, it's not too deep, but it's deep enough to give us what we actually need. And if we have to go even further, you can still go and look at the really detailed loose-leafed stuff in the law libraries. So let me conclude by saying that all readers, whether lay or professional, will find the book an excellent research resource with almost 30 pages of tables, cases, statutes and statutory instruments to be expected. There's a detailed table of contents, which I've indicated at the back, with the front with the index at the back, and it does actually aid navigation when you're looking for something specific if you're pressed for time. So in all, the book will certainly be an invaluable addition to your professional library in this particular area of law, and the publication date is given as 2014, so it's basically the beginning of this year. I'd like to thank Jordan's and Professor Kay and everybody involved in this, because again, we rely very much on these books as practitioners, so we've got some idea of what is happening. And I think in this day and age it's useful for the clients to know of this sort of book, because whilst they may well have some idea of what's going on, they will have to come to us eventually, because we have, of course, the additional experience and expertise with practice and procedural issues. Thank you so much to all concerned anyway. Bye-bye.